And to conclude, it's my pleasure to introduce Brent Hoberman. Brent.
Great, thanks. Where to start? I mean, I'm almost tempted to turn this into slightly interactive because I'm not sure which bits of my story would be most relevant or interesting. But I'll start, I guess, very briefly with a bit of lastminute.com, and then I'll probably ask you if you want me to go on more about that. We'll talk more about the future, and because lastminute.com feels a long time ago to me. It was 10 years ago, pretty much this month, actually, since we launched lastminute.com. So it's a while back for me, but I can still remember most of it. So I guess firstly is just coming up with the idea and that sort of stuff, and it really is. Well, I'll go back a step again. I think luck is a very important part. We haven't talked about that, but actually I think, or what Andrew Davidson calls in his book, smart luck, I think, in entrepreneurship. I think anyone who's been successful can attribute it to so many different factors, and there's so many things that have to happen. But actually you also need some luck, and I think almost every single entrepreneur I know is humble enough to admit that right through the process, it could go either way. It could absolutely. So we've all, even those of us, I sold lastminute.com for over $1 billion, but it could have been sold for nothing. It's that fine line often when you're going through it. So I think that's a very humbling experience, and one that means I hope that and I think almost all of the best entrepreneurs I see, they are actually very humble despite, and it's interesting to see some of the real super billionaires are actually very humble because they know that they got there, yes, through incredible hard work, through a lot of self-belief, but also because a couple of lucky breaks went their way and a couple of people believed in them. So going back then, so for lastminute.com, despite that background, so I could say, yes, I was very clever because I had a decent idea. Yeah, so I was lucky I had a decent idea. So the idea, the timing was very important for lastminute.com. And basically, but the genesis of the idea, I think, is valid. And it really was forcing myself to think of a business idea and forcing myself to think of what do I want as a customer. And it was basically seeing the internet back in '96, thinking, I'm not buying anything from the internet. I'm a classic early adopter. And all I'm buying is books from Amazon in the US in '96. So I was thinking, well, what would I do on the internet? I thought, literally, this is true, I thought I'd do everything at the last minute, including arriving here today, some of you may have noticed. And I still can't help it. And I thought, well, the internet would be a pretty good medium for that, wouldn't it? So I thought there must be some other people out there like me. So I then worked on that idea with a friend, without going into too much detail. But it was '96, and actually timing is everything. And one thing I thought was, I was just a strategy consultant at the time, and I thought, I don't really know very much about the internet. The internet's actually quite small in the UK. Last minute stuff is still only a part of a vertical. It's not an entire vertical. So I thought I'd better wait and I'd better learn. So I then went to work in the internet, and basically what I did, I spent 10 months in the internet at 2 jobs, which at the time in '97 was an eternity, '97, beginning of '98. Luckily, I fell out, again, I fell out with Tim Jackson, who founded QXL, the online auction company, and I was basically co-founded it with him. I was the first proper employee. And after 4 months, I thought this isn't going to be much fun. So I went to do lastminute.com, and at that point, 10 months of the internet was a huge amount of experience. It really was bizarre. It literally was. We said it was like 7 years of experience in a normal job, because you couldn't find many people in the UK who'd had that much experience, which seems ridiculous because 10 months doesn't really mean you know everything you're talking about. And so what we then did was we did the classic thing. We were both, Martha and I, obviously Martha, probably everyone knows it, well, not everyone knows, but no reason why people shouldn't know. But she was my second choice, actually, to start the business. My first choice was somebody I'd worked with before, but she was a brilliant. So my first choice was the guy who'd actually helped me write some stuff about lastminute.com back in when I was a consultant in '96. So I thought, right, I'd have to ask him if he wants to still do it. He didn't want to do it. So I persuaded Martha, who at first told me lots of jokes about what a bad idea it was. And then eventually she decided to leave Carlton because Carlton wasn't much fun for her. And thank goodness she was obviously the best partner I could have hoped for to do that business. So together we wrote the business plan. Wrote the business plan in about 6 weeks. We then went to investors and about just people we'd met along the way somehow, not people we knew particularly well. Sent the business plan to 20 people. 10 agreed to see us, and 5 agreed to invest. The investment stories, and for those seeking investment, the really obvious thing of human nature and human psychology is, and although it's so obvious, I'll still repeat it because I still see some people who are probably more trusting in human nature than they should be. Investment's about greed and fear. It's about fear that you might miss out is a great motivator. So at the beginning of investing in lastminute.com, we went to these people, and one of our investors who did end up investing was so analytical, and they'd all been to a good business school I won't name because I was too obvious who they are, but and they'd been to a brilliant, and they were they just couldn't get over the hurdle of just saying, yeah, we'll put it in at this valuation. So we went to see another guy called Tom Teichmann, and who I met by mistake actually. My director of inquiries gave me the wrong phone number. It's a true story. Honestly, true story. I won't go into it to you. But Tom, after 5 minutes, he met Martha and I, said, I'm in. I'll do the whole lot if you want, or whatever. And so then suddenly these other investors who we also really wanted in because we thought they could add value decided they were in too. But otherwise it would have taken a lot longer and been at an even lower valuation. The first round valuation was very, very low with hindsight. But hindsight's a fine thing. So we then went on, raised that, and then I think part of the luck part was being part of a zeitgeist thing for lastminute.com. It was a zeitgeist thing. Part of it also was something I think we only saw with hindsight, was the national debate almost. I mean, national may sound a bit too grand, but the fact of whether this was a great idea or or just the most massively overvalued thing ever, and whether it was a total waste of time, or two Muppets in a business plan. And basically, the fact that PR thing, without us creating it, we weren't as cynical as to create it, but it became this this debate generally that people did talk about, meant people were talking about it a lot. And so that old adage of negative publicity is okay too, is true. And actually, at the beginning, we didn't have to spend that much on advertising. A lot of it was about creating something that's unique. And in this day and age, that's even more important. I think traditional advertising is obviously going to go through continued seismic shifts, particularly because so many new brands now that we look at have been built without any traditional advertising. Why? Because people just build a great product, and then there is a mechanic now that you can tell all your friends about it. So that means to me a lot of the new marketing money in my new business, mydeco.com, what we're doing is we're investing a lot of our marketing money into the product itself. As we saw from Richard as well, I think you could argue that that's a lot of what they're doing too. Not into having to shout about the product so loud. What we're trying to do is say, look, let's make this thing so much better and so useful for people that they will talk about it, that they will tell everyone else about it, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. And I think what's part of the seismic disruption in advertising is that it has been historically overvalued, is what the internet is showing us.
Cool. Brent, thank you.